So I think, if I'm counting right, and you can ask anybody, but especially my dad, he'll tell you that math was never my strong suit. So, I don't know if I'm counting right or not. But I think today is our third and final week in the book of Amos. And I don't know if you have enjoyed it. But in some ways, I don't know if I care, because I really liked it. It is without a doubt one of my favorite books to teach on. And it's been tough to go through the whole thing in 3 weeks. So if you are, I don't know, you can say if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to be stuck with me for 30 years like you have been with Phil, then at some point in time, I would love to spend 9 weeks, and go through this book chapter by chapter. So you stick around for another 30 years, and so do I. It'll happen. But today, that's not going to be the case. We don't get to spend a week chapter, unfortunately. So here's the way we're going to try to go through stuff this morning. We're looking at chapters 6 through 9. And I think they even put the page numbers up there. Mine doesn't have page numbers. I just get to cheat, right? But what we're going to try to do is just breeze through chapter 6 really quickly. We'll spend a lot of time on chapter 7, just a few verses in particular. Then we'll ignore most of 8. And then Amos is kind of a sad book, but it ends really happy. So then we'll read the end of chapter 9, just so that we don't leave just feeling horrible about ourselves, right? It's a good deal that way. But chapter 6, I think it's a tough chapter for us to read. Because in so many ways, chapter 6 seems to mirror our culture. God has been getting upset at the Hebrew people here in Amos for quite a few different things. But in chapter 6, he really gets frustrated at them for the fact that they have so much stuff. And they don't help other people with it like they should. In kind of the beginning of verse 6 there, chapter 6, maybe in verse 4, it says, "You lie on beds adorned with ivory and lounge on your couches. You dine on choice lambs and fattened calves. You strum away on your harps like David and improvise on musical instruments. You drink wine by the bowlful." We can just stop there because that's a great one, huh? But then looks at him and says, here's the problem, you have so much stuff and you do nothing with it. And it was a tough thing for me to kind of read through and prepare for that this week, as one of the things that was highlighted the most often in the news this week is this caravan coming up from Honduras through Mexico, right? They say there's between 7,000 and 10,000 people that are marching this way because they think we've got stuff. And kind of no matter where you fall on the spectrum of should they make it in here, should they not make it in here, what do we do? Oh my goodness, is it not tragic that we're sitting in a church that's giving away a bunch of free donuts and coffee? That we're taking a collection for a food pantry today, because right through that door, we've got just tons of food just sitting there, waiting for people to come and ask. And we've got 10,000 people marching this way, literally starving to death. Now, I don't know what the answers are, but I do know that our God has the answers, and they're sitting right in this room. Right? And that's what he accuses the people of in chapter 6. He says, if you've got the resources, if you have the ability to take care of this, then you have to get out there and do something. And unfortunately, it doesn't really tell us what the answer is, because I think it's easy to stand up here on Sunday morning and say, well, we got to take care of the people that are coming through. And I don't really know how we would do that, right? But I think it's the call of God's people to do things just like that. We had a bunch of people on Friday night that went to a great banquet for Christ's sake, right? That's doing those exact sort of things in Uganda. It's a great thing, but he doesn't really stop there, so we'll keep going since he spends time on other things. We get through the end of chapter 6, and then from chapter 7 through 9, he's going to give us 5 strange visions. And they're really kind of confusing, as I think any vision is, right? And so we're going to hear these little snippets of these visions, And if you're anything like me, you're going to be fairly confused by it. But we're going to go through the first two pretty quickly, and then hopefully spend a long time picking apart the third one and seeing if we can't find something great from it. So starting in Amos chapter 7, in verse 1, it says, "This is what the sovereign Lord showed me. He was preparing a swarm of locusts after the king shared and harvested, and just as the late crops were coming up." So in other words, everything is growing really, really well. Right? We used to live out on the Eastern Plains where so many people made their money through farming. And I tell you, there was like a 3-week time span when everybody was nervous. Because like all the crops had grown up high enough that they could probably be harvested, but they shouldn't really be harvested yet. I don't know why. Farmers were always confusing with when they wanted rain and when they didn't, and I don't know. But there was just this terror of, what happens if there's a hailstorm this week? Like all of their money for the year is just gone. And that same time frame, that 3 weeks when they would all collectively hold their breaths, is the same time frame now that God is showing Amos this vision. And it's related to this overabundance. And he shows him this vision that I think is supposed to represent the people. Right? And it's like, hey, you've got everything you need. Everything's great. You're about to harvest your crops. And he sends in a swarm of locusts, which just is not very friendly at all. And in verse 2, it says, "When they had stripped the land clean, I cried out, 'Sovereign Lord, forgive.'" God, don't do this. It says, "How can Jacob survive? He is so small." God, I know we've screwed up. But you can't go that far. You can't do that much to us. Forgive us. Help us. And it's awesome because God answers his prayer in verse 3. "So the Lord relented." Wouldn't that be great? God gives you this huge vision and he's like, "I'm wiping everything out." And you're like, Jesus, I don't think that's such a great idea. And he says, "Oh, okay, I won't then," you know. But I think Amos was in for a little bit of a surprise because the next verse, "Then this is what the sovereign Lord showed me. The sovereign Lord was calling for judgment by fire." I'd pick the locust, right? If it was going to be the choice between this storm of fire or locusts, I'm picking some bugs. But it says, "It dried up the deep and devoured the land. Then I cried out, 'Sovereign Lord, I beg you, how can Jacob survive? He is so small.'" The second time in a row, God just looks at him and says, I'm wiping everybody out. You've got too much stuff. You don't do the right things with your stuff. And so I'm taking you out. And Amos says, "But God, help us." And I wonder, as America, we've got a lot of problems, right? No matter how much you love our country, I think you can look up here and say, yeah, there's some issues with what we do. And I wonder how many times God has wanted to step in and destroy us for things. And how many times we've been saved by people's prayers. How many times have us crying out to God caused him to relent on things he was supposed to do, that he wanted to do? Our prayers are so much more powerful than we think. And with Amos, it's a little easier. Right? He gets to see the vision, he prays, and then God answers him, which is kind of cool. I don't know about you, but God doesn't often look at me and say, "Okay, I'll do what you want, Jeff." But you also get to look at it and say, "Oh my goodness, so many of the things that I prayed for, God has done." Or he hasn't done it, and then he showed me I was stupid for asking what I was asking for. He had a much better way to go about it. That's more often than not what takes place. But I think one of the kind of side lessons we can learn from Amos here is if we cry out to God for things, boy, he is so excited to help us. He ends that, "This will not happen either," the sovereign Lord says. But then we get into this third vision. And this third vision is really strange. Starting in verse 7, here's what it says. "This is what the sovereign Lord showed me. The Lord was standing by a wall that had been built true to plumb with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord asked me, "What do you see, Amos?" "A plumb line," I replied. And we're going to find out later. That was a really dumb answer. At least that's my opinion. Then the Lord said, "Look, I am setting a plumb line among my people Israel. I will spare them no longer." Here's the vision that we see, right? Just kind of walk it through, because Amos describes his vision. God gives him this picture. Amos is looking, and here's the list of things that Amos sees. It says, the Lord. Right? It starts off in Amos' vision. God is just standing there. I don't know about you. I've never gotten a vision where I get to see God. I think that would be awesome. The Lord is standing, and then he's standing by a wall. Okay, maybe that part's not super exciting. But it says a wall had been built true to plumb. I don't really know how you figure this out. Okay? When I'm going to picture a wall, all of them are going to be fairly straight up and down. That's just, what a wall does. When it says it's built true to plumb, that's all it means. It's standing up straight. What kind of a wall does it have to be that as Amos sees a vision and he sees God standing next to this wall, that it's remarkable how straight this wall is? Right? Think about that for a second. The way God constructed this wall made it so that as Amos has a vision, it stands out to Amos how straight up and down the wall is. Our God can take even the most simple of things, the things you don't really think about at all, and turn them into something extraordinary, right? It's a wall. It's supposed to be straight up and down. But Amos notices it's the most straight up and down wall he has ever seen and probably has ever been built. And he remarks about that. And then he says, with a plumb line in his hand. So you see God, you see this remarkable wall, and you see a string, right? That's what a plumb line is. It's just a string with a goofy little weight at the bottom of it. And then the Lord looks at him and he says, Amos, sorry, my little girl gave me candy this morning. He says, Amos, what do you see? And Amos says, I see a string with something awkward tied on the bottom of it. You're standing there looking at God, and you focus on a plumb line, a goofy string with something hanging off of it. I don't know about you, but if I'm staring at God, I'm looking at him, and he says, what do you see? I'm not going to comment on the string that he's holding. Well, I mean, am I the only one that thinks this is kind of weird? But that's what he does. You got God, you got a really straight wall, you got a string, and Amos looks at it and says, all I care about is the string. And you see, there's probably a reason, right? Like God has us say these things for a reason. Then the Lord said, look, I'm setting a plumb line, I'm putting the awkward string among my people, and I will spare them no longer. What does it mean that we've got a strange string that's set among the people? It basically means this. There's a standard. God is looking at the people and saying, there's an objective standard that you have to measure up to, that you have to live up to. And my question for us this morning is what is our standard? What's the thing that we're measuring everything by? Right? There's got to be a plumb line for all sorts of different aspects of our life. What's the plumb line for your relationship with your spouse? What's the plumb line for the relationship with your kids? What's the plumb line for the relationship with your neighbors? And what's kind of fun is if you think back to this image that Amos got from God, there's no other people in it. So when God sets his plumb line out there, He's not saying, oh, you got to compare it to the person sitting to your right. They've got it figured out. No, that doesn't happen at all, right? Amos doesn't look at another person. He looks at a goofy little string. And he says, I'm setting this weird string among everybody. And this is the standard. But it's kind of confusing. I don't know about you, but I don't really know what that standard would be. But he tells us there is one. I was just writing down some things that I wonder if we have a standard for how we deal with the poor. Do we have a plumb line for how we deal with the sick? Do we have a plumb line for how we deal with the lost? But more importantly, if God set this plumb line out there in our community, would we recognize it? Do we know our community and our people well enough that if God put a plumb line right down the middle of it, that we'd be able to tell whether our community was straight or whether it was crooked? See, because a plumb line doesn't tell you if the color on the wall is good. Right? Like I could look at a wall, and if it's yellow or red, tell you, one of those is great, one of those is not so great. A plumb line doesn't tell you if the pictures on the wall are good. A plumb line doesn't care how tall or how short the wall is. And I think what's happening here is that God's saying, you know what, we have to be able to critique things according to the only thing that matters. There's one standard. And there's lots of stuff we think is important. And those two aren't always the same. I got to come in here last night. I told you earlier, Iglesia was having their youth service in here, right? And so I came in here and the speakers were turned up loud enough that for most of you, you wouldn't have been in the church, much less in this room, right? All of the lights are off, and they had, I almost asked them to leave them here today, but our band probably wouldn't have been too happy with it. They had like these giant black felt things with these puzzle piece looking deals on it. Because the theme of their weekend was the missing piece. And then they had these huge can lights that were shining up at them. And then like disco light type things that were behind those, just pouring out this way. So there were, colorful dots all over the ceiling, shining in people's eyes, being super distracting, right? And then half of the time that they were singing, they'll just break out in the middle with just the same line repeated over and over. And for at least half the time, they were either screaming in English or in Spanish, "Dance for the Lord." And so then there's just like 40, well, I don't know how many kids there were, a bunch of kids lined up here, like half pushing each other, half just jumping up and down, all just being stupid, right? And I can almost guarantee that if any of you would have walked in here, you would have said, "That's horrible." Right? Like, that's not a way to worship God at all. And it could be true that for you it wasn't. But for the people that were here, that's exactly how they worshiped God. And so if you held the plumb line up to our services, and you held the plumb line up to what happened last night, God would have looked at two things that were just about as different as they could be, and said, oh yeah, both of those measure up perfectly. And so how do we know, in a culture that's so full of just strange stuff, what measures up and what doesn't? But here's where I think it gets a little bit more interesting. Because I don't think God wants us wandering around with an awkward string, trying to decide if people are doing a good job or people are doing a bad job. It's one of the big differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament. See, in the Old Testament, God said, I'm putting my people Israel out there, and here's their job. Their job is to be a model of perfection. Right? They've been given the law. They're supposed to be holy. They're supposed to be set apart. And when the other nations look at them, they're supposed to say, wow, that's how I'm supposed to live. And so naturally, God gets pretty frustrated at them frequently Because you've read much of the Old Testament, you realize they don't really meet that very often, right? But in the New Testament, he does something completely different. And he says, I'm tired of sending cheap imitations of my holiness. I'm tired of trying to help people understand it, but they're not getting a full picture of what it really is. And so in the New Testament, instead of sending Israel to show people how to live, he sends his son to show people how to live. And he says, this is the model for what you're supposed to be. And so after Jesus, our goal is not to wander around with a silly string with a weight tied to it, showing people how they should live. I think he's sending us around with this and saying, boy, you guys can help make people's lives straight. You know, if you use a plumb line after a wall is built to tell somebody that it's crooked, it's a little late, right? The only thing that you get to do is push it over. But if you show up as they're in the process of building it, and you get to say, hey, I think you could use a little help there. Things are looking a little crooked. Then all of a sudden we've got a message that can help. But we have to know our community well enough to be able to go out there and do that, right? If we walk out and rather than talking about if the wall is straight or crooked, we talk about the fact that we don't like a wall painted pink, then we're in trouble. And what does it take to get to know our community in a way that we can figure this stuff out? Because there are a lot of problems in our community. And I'm not sure how many of us know the problems well. Let me tell you a quick story, if I could, that might hopefully help out with this. I was born like 10 miles away from here. You know, I lived in Colorado my whole life. I feel like I know it fairly well, except for I spent about a decade living 45 minutes east of here. And 45 minutes east of here is a completely different world than right here. In nearly every way imaginable, right? Like, since I moved back to town here, there hasn't been a single time where I've had to sit there and wait for the combine to pass before I can turn out and go where I need to go, right? But where I used to live, it was commonplace. I kid you not, I showed up to McDonald's once where we used to live, and I parked my Jeep next to this van, and then I stare at it for at least 15 minutes. And here's what's unfortunate. I took a picture of it, and I spent far more time than I want to admit to today trying to find this picture. My dad's laughing because I sent him the picture once. In the van next to me were 2 cows. Oh my goodness. There's a time that my wife and I were trying to sleep. We didn't have air conditioning out there, right? So the windows, we still don't. The windows are always open, and our dog is just going nuts. To the point where I kind of want to murder my dog, right? It's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and she will not shut up. And I'm trying to stay asleep, but it won't work. And so finally I decide to go out in the backyard and see what's wrong with my dog. And I'm pretty sure I know, because more than a few times in the middle of the night, I've had to wander out in the backyard with a shotgun to kill the skunk that my dog is in love with, right? Not this time, no. There's a cow standing on my back patio. I don't have a cow. I don't know where this is coming from, right? I like cows, but usually like a few weeks after they died, it's just a T-bone sitting there on the plate. I don't like them when they're making my dog go crazy. I remember it was so strange when I first showed up there in Strasbourg, and we had to make a rule at youth group. Take your spurs off before you come in. These are not things that go through my head on a daily basis, right? Just one more, because it was so much fun. I remember driving down, there's a kind of a main road that goes through our town, Strasbourg Road, right? And I'm driving down and I look, and there's something not quite right at a student's house. And I'm like, they're going to want to know this. And so I call the student, and he doesn't answer. And then I call his mom, and she doesn't answer. And sometimes you get the feeling that people aren't really as busy as they like to say they are. They just don't want to talk to you, you know? And so I think to myself, I think that both of these people really want to know the news I have to share with them, and they're just ignoring me right now. So pull over and pull out my phone, and rather than calling them, I just send a message to this kid and his mom, and just said, hey, just so you know, both of Jacob's 4-H steers are in the middle of Strasburg Road. And hit send. And wouldn't you know it, when you get a message that your cows are wandering across the middle of the road, they're not as busy and they call you back. But it was just strange. It was a different world out there. And if you read the opening verses of Amos, Amos says he was a shepherd from Tekoa. And I think when Amos heard from God and God said, look, you got to go into the big city and you got to tell people about me, he said, no, they're weird. I don't want to go in there. We heard all the time when we were living in Strasburg, city folk are weird, right? It was kind of a common thing. You'd see things happen. I have to tell you, since we moved back into town, there's only one time that Shannon and I have said it. We were driving down Parker Road one day, and I kid you not, there was a line at least 300 cars long to get into the off-leash dog park at the bottom of Cherry Creek, you know? And I just looked at it and I was like, I don't think I should say this, but city folk are weird. But I think as Amos is getting called to come in, he's like, I don't understand these people. Look at the way they dress. That's dumb. Look at the way they talk. Look at the things they do. Look at the food that they eat. He says, God, I'm just a shepherd. I don't want to be part of this weird, big city culture. And God said, too bad. If you're going to be my voice, you have to understand who you're talking to. You don't have to be a part of it. But if you don't understand them, you can't do anything. And so Amos wanders in, and I bet he's got to spend a lot of time figuring out who these people are, figuring out what's important about them, figuring out who they say is important to them, figuring out when he holds up this silly plumb line, how does he tell the difference between walls that just look weird, because they got graffiti all over them, and they're painted strange, and walls that are actually crooked. You know, if we look into our community, there's lots of places that we could hold a plumb line up to it and say, that's not right. Our kid sister and I over at my house on Tuesday night, and we were talking and we came up with some of these. I can't remember who in the room said it, but we were going through this study, and so they read something and they just said, they looked at the group and said, I have to tell you something. Do you realize that the research has come out that says by the year 2030, that 65% of kids will grow up in a single-parent household? Oh my goodness, if that doesn't break our hearts, what does, right? And there are so many problems that come with this. They've done way more research than is needed to show if you grow up with one parent instead of growing up with two parents, boy, your life is just going to be tougher. So we could wander around with this, and we could tell everybody that growing up in a single-parent household is a bad idea, right? And they'd say, I know. The problem isn't knowing whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's what we do about it. And I think it's one of the areas that New Hope has latched onto and said, we can help with this. Because they say that the test scores of kids coming from single-parent households are always far lower than test scores of kids coming from two-parent households. So what does New Hope do? They say, you know what? Let's let this Whiz Kids tutoring group meet here every week. It's a way that we can hold a plumb line out to our community and we can say, there's a place where you're not standing up straight and we can help with it. But we got in there and noticed it wasn't going very well, right? Because kids show up hungry. And I don't ever like doing math, but I certainly wouldn't like doing math when I was hungry, right? And so we looked at these kids and we said, oh my goodness, there's another problem. You don't want to do anything when you show up here because you're hungry. We held up a plumb line to our community and we said, it's not right that there's so many people that are so busy that when they show up to give their kids tutoring, they haven't even had time, and sometimes they haven't even had the money to feed their kids a meal. And we can look at it and say, that's not right, you shouldn't do that. Or we could say, I'm not just going to point out that your wall is crooked. I'm going to fix it. And so if you just show up 20 minutes earlier, before our tutoring starts, we'll have some delicious food for you. And if you show up to help, then it's awesome, because Kelsey will always make me peanut butter cookies as well. That's just fantastic. But these are the things that New Hope, that this group right here can do. If we understand our community, if we understand the people that are living in our community, God has given us a way to say, yeah, if you walk out there with a silly string, you can do some amazing things. You can walk out there and say, I'm not just going to point out that everything is crooked. I'm going to help you fix it as well. Unfortunately, if you look at it, that doesn't happen too well, because he gives them 2 more visions and he ends up destroying all of Judah because they didn't walk out and do this. Like, there's a lot on the line here, because if we don't do what God has called us to do, things aren't going to go well for us. He's not going to keep saying at the end of every vision, I will relent. But the book ends in a little bit of a different way. The book ends chapter 9, verse 13. This is the very end of the book. Right? And God has showed Amos all these visions. He showed him all the sins. And now he says, here's the way everything finishes. He says, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman. We kind of read that, and I don't think we understand it very well. Our farmer friends where I used to live, but it says, and the planter by the one treading grapes. Think about the intense exaggeration of this, right? You got 2 people. One of them throwing grape seeds in the ground. The second one pulling the grapes off of the vines. And he says, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a guy going through, throwing grape seeds in the ground. And the guy that's coming behind him, taking the grapes off of those vines, is going to overtake him. There's going to be about 2 seconds between when you throw this grape seed in the ground and you got all the fruit. God looks at it and says, you know what, if you do things the way I want you to do, we're going to break all the rules. Things are going to happen so fast. Like the laws of nature cannot confine what God can do with a bunch of people that are excited about following Him. It says, new wine will drip from the mountains and flow from all the hills, and I will bring my people Israel back from exile. They will rebuild the ruined cities. They probably have to rebuild them because they're built with crooked walls, right? They'll rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. They'll plant vineyards and drink their wine. They'll make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant Israel in their own land, never again to be uprooted from the land I have given them, says the Lord your God. That's what's on the line. If we do what God is calling us to do, that would be the description of our community. Let's pray. Father, we love you. We thank you for what you have done, what you are doing, and what you will do in our lives and in our community. And we pray right now that you would show us what it is that we can go out into our community and find crooked and help make straight for you. And we thank you so much for being the God that's able to make these things straight. And we ask that you would help show us how to do that. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.